you don't have to answer this, but I have to ask you about the spitball and kind of how that developed into part of your repertoire. And at what point in your career did you kind of incorporate that as a weapon to use against hitters?
I'll give you one answer. All the chances I got.
The sad truth about Gaylord Perry is this. Even after 314 wins, 2 Cy Young Awards, and a place in the Hall of Fame, many people still remember him first as baseball's most famous cheater. He won more games than almost anyone of his time. He pitched for 22 long seasons. He struck out thousands of batters. Yet, when fans hear his name, they often think of one thing: the A wet ball, the A hidden trick, the A pitch that broke the rules. This is the story of a brilliant man who made his own greatness hard to trust. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. Think about those numbers for a moment. 304 wins, 2 Cy Young Awards, 1 in each league, 3,534 strikeouts, 303 complete games, the A bronze plaque in Cooperstown. By any normal measure, that is a true legend. But Perry's name does not bring a clean and simple feeling. It brings doubt. And if a baseball story like this one deserves more shine, give this video some hype so more fans can find it, because Perry's story only gets stranger from here. This is not a simple fall from grace. Perry did become a star. He really did all of those things. But he also became a warning. He became proof that a player can be remembered most for the thing people believe he got away with. He got the wins. He got the awards. He got the plaque. What he never got was a clean story. So how did it happen? How did a poor farm kid from North Carolina grow into one of the best pitchers the game has ever seen, one of its most famous rule breakers, and later a man knocked down by bankruptcy and heartbreak? To understand the trick, you first have to understand the boy. And the boy learned something important very early. He learned that life is not always fair, and that sometimes you do whatever you must to survive. His life would split into 3 parts, and each one is hard to look at on its own. First came the greatness, the kind that earns awards and a seat among legends. Came the suspicion, the doubt that he created himself and could never quite escape. And finally came the loss, the kind of pain that has nothing to do with baseball at all. Most stories pick just one of those paths: the A hero, the A villain, the A Vic. Perry's story refuses to choose. It holds all 3 at the same time, and that is exactly what makes it so hard to tell and so hard to forget. So let us go back to the very beginning, before the wins, before the wet ball, before the heartbreak, to a small farm where a tough little boy was already learning the lesson that would shape everything. Gaylord Perry was born on September 15, 1938, in Williamston, North Carolina. He grew up in a tiny place called Farm Life in Martin County. His parents were Evan and Ruby Perry. They were tenant farmers. That means they did not own their land. They worked land that belonged to someone else. They sharecropped a small parcel of about 25 acres. On that ground, they grew tobacco, corn, and peanuts. Every season, their survival depended on the weather, the soil, and the price of crops. There was no safety net. If the harvest failed, the family failed. It was a hard life with very little room for mistakes, and the Perrys lived right on that edge for years. The Perry family had almost nothing. Gaylord did not even have indoor plumbing until he was 15 years old. From the time he was very young, his days were full of work. He labored in the tobacco fields from dawn to dusk. He worked beside his older brother James Perry, who most people called Jim. Jim would also grow up to become a major league pitcher. So this was a family that knew baseball, but it was also a family that knew hard labor first. This childhood built something inside Gaylord Perry. It built toughness. It built patience. But it also built a survival mindset. When you grow up watching your parents fight just to clear their debts, you learn that the world does not hand you anything. You learn to adapt. You learn to do what the moment needs. You learn that rules made by other people do not always protect you. That farm boy did not know it yet, but that same survival thinking would one day follow him onto a major league mound. The lessons of the field stayed with him. When his back was against the wall, he would not quit. He would find a way. And later in his life, that exact way would make him both famous and infamous at the very same time. But before any of that, Perry was simply a gifted young athlete with a chance to escape the farm. And it turned out he had a very big chance, because the boy from farm life was special. Gaylord Perry grew tall and strong. He stood 6 feet 4 inches. That size, plus all those years of heavy farm work, made him a powerful young man. He was not just big. He could play. At Williamston High School, Perry starred in 3 sports. He played football. He played baseball. He played basketball. He was good at all of them. On the basketball court, he was a real force. His high school team went 94-8. That is an amazing record. Perry himself averaged nearly 30 points and 20 rebounds per game. Those are huge numbers for any player at any level. He could have chased other sports if he wanted to. But baseball was where his future would be. In 1955, Gaylord and his brother Jim showed the world how good they were on the mound. The two brothers threw back-to-back shutouts. They swept the North Carolina Class A State Championship Series. Two brothers, two shutouts, one title. It was the kind of story that made scouts pay attention. And the scouts did pay attention. On June 3, 1958, a San Francisco Giants scout named Tom Sheehan signed Perry to a professional contract. The Giants gave him a signing bonus of $90,000. For a poor farm family in the 1950s, that was a fortune. It was more money than the Perry family had ever seen. Here is where you see the good in Gaylord Perry. He did not keep all that money for himself. He gave half of his bonus to his parents. With that money, his mother and father were finally able to clear their farming debts. For the first time in their married lives, they were free of that weight. It was a loyal and loving thing to do. So, in this part of the story, Perry is not a trickster. He is a gifted young man who loved his family. He was huge, strong, and talented. He did the right thing with his big break. But there is a quiet shadow under this bright moment. The same young man who helped his parents escape debt would, many years later, fall deep into debt himself. The money came to him early, and money would leave him cruelly late. That circle would close in a way no one could see coming. Before now, though, the road looked open. Perry had escaped the farm. He had a bonus, a contract, and a dream. All he had to do was pitch well enough to stay. But staying would prove much harder than getting there. Gaylord Perry spent his first years grinding through the minor leagues. He played in the minors from 1958 to 1961. He moved from town to town, learning his craft, building his arm, and trying to prove he belonged. He started in 1958 with the St. Cloud Rocks, far from the bright lights. The next 2 seasons he pitched in the Texas League, first for the Corpus Christi Giants and then for the Rio Grande Valley Giants. Those years were a mixed bag. He took plenty of losses and learned hard lessons along the way, but his best minor league season came in 1961, when he pitched for AAA Tacoma. That year, he led the entire Pacific Coast League in both wins and innings pitched. He was throwing well, and he was throwing often. He looked ready. In 1962, Perry got his chance. He made his debut with the San Francisco Giants. The big league dream had arrived, but Giants were a strong team with strong pitching. Their rotation already had a future Hall of Famer named Juan Marichal. There was simply not much room for a young pitcher who had not yet proven he could win at this level. So Perry got stuck. He could not lock down a steady role. By 1963, the Giants were using him in an uneven way out of the bullpen. He never knew when he would pitch or how long he would stay in. That kind of role is hard for any pitcher. It is hard to find a rhythm. It is hard to build trust, and the results showed it. In 1963, Perry put up a record of just 1 win and 6 losses. His ERA was 4.33. Those are the numbers of a man fighting for his career, not a man who has arrived. He was not a legend. He was not even a sure thing. He was a struggling pitcher who could feel the door starting to close. Perry knew exactly what that meant. He came from a world where failure was not just sad, it was dangerous. On the farm, a bad season could ruin a family. Now a bad season could end his career and send him right back to the fields he had escaped. That old survival instinct woke up inside him. He decided that he had to change something. He decided that if he wanted to stay in the major leagues, he would have to adapt. And the way he chose to adapt would follow him for the rest of his life. The turning point came in the spring of 1964. During spring training that year, a teammate named Bob Shaw taught Gaylord Perry the mechanics of the wet pitch. This was the spitball, and the spitball was not just a tough pitch. It was an illegal one. Major League Baseball had banned the spitball back in 1920. It had been against the rules for more than 40 years. But the truth is that the pitch never fully disappeared. It stayed alive as a quiet, hidden weapon used by pitchers who were trying to survive on the edge of the league. Perry was now exactly that kind of pitcher. He was on the edge. He was fighting to stay. Someone handed him a way to fight back. Perry first used the wet pitch in a real game on May 31, 1964. The setting could not have been bigger. It was a marathon doubleheader against the New York Mets. The game stretched on and on. Perry came into the action and pitched the 15th inning and beyond. In all, he threw 10 scoreless innings in relief. 10 innings without giving up a run. It was a remarkable performance, and it changed everything for him. That outing helped Perry finally win a permanent place in the starting rotation. The struggling reliever became a trusted starter. The career that had been slipping away was suddenly safe. From the outside, it looked like a great success story. The young pitcher had figured it out and saved his career. But look closer, and you see the real cost. Perry did not just learn a new pitch that day. He crossed a line. He started a long war of attrition that would last for 20 years. A quiet battle against opposing batters, against umpires, and against league officials who would spend 2 decades trying to catch him. He stepped into a world where every great game he pitched would come with a question attached. From that point on, when Perry pitched well, people would not only ask how good he was, they would ask what he was doing to the ball. He saved his career and damaged his legacy in the very same moment. That single choice is the heart of the whole Gaylord Perry story. So what exactly was this pitch? Let us keep it simple. Throw the wet pitch, Perry would put a foreign substance on the baseball. Over the years, he was said to use many things. He used saliva, he used slippery elm bark, he used Vaseline, he used KY jelly, he even used hair creams. Any of these could make a slick spot on the ball. Here's why that mattered. The normal pitch spins in a clean and steady way. The seams grip the air, and the spin holds the ball on a path the hitter can read. But when Perry put a slick substance on one spot, the ball did not spin the normal way. As the ball left his hand, it slid off his fingers with almost no spin. There was less friction. There was less grip. The result was a strange and nasty pitch. Came in looking like a fastball. It had the speed of a fastball, but near the plate, it suddenly dropped. To the hitter, the ball would look normal at first and then fall away at the last second. That late drop made batters swing over the ball or hit it weakly. They would beat it into the ground or miss it completely. A good hitter could be made to look foolish. That is the simple version of the trick. The clean pitch obeys the rules of spin. Perry's pitch broke them. He took away the spin, and the ball did something no hitter wanted to see. It was hard to hit because it was hard to predict, and because it looked so much like a normal fastball until the very end, it was also hard to prove. But here's the part that made Perry truly special and truly frustrating. The wet pitch was only half of his weapon. The other half lived inside the hitter's own head. Perry understood something that few players ever figure out. He learned that making a hitter think he was cheating could be just as powerful as actually cheating. The fear of the pitch could ruin a hitter even when the pitch was clean. So Perry leaned into that fear on purpose. Before nearly every pitch, Perry put on a show. He touched his cap. He touched his eyebrows. He touched his jersey. He touched his belt. He even touched his crotch. He went through this routine again and again. To the hitter at the plate, it looked like he was reaching for some hidden grease. Maybe he was. Maybe he was not. That was the whole point. The hitter could never be sure. This drove batters out of their minds. Instead of watching the pitch, they were watching Perry's hands. Instead of trusting their swing, they were second-guessing every move. Their focus broke. Their timing slipped. They were beaten before the ball even left his hand. Perry did not only pitch to hitters, he pitched to their nerves. The complaints followed a strange pattern. Perry pitched badly, the grumbling died down. Nobody bothered to accuse a man who was losing, but if Perry dominated, the uproar grew loud. The managers screamed, players pointed. The better he was, the angrier they got. The angrier they got, the more it proved that his mind games were working. To get past the umpires, Perry got creative in ways that were almost shameless. He was said to hide his slick substances in unusual places, including around his pants zipper or the fly of his uniform. He was betting that umpires would feel too awkward to search a man there. He used the rules of polite behavior against the people trying to catch him. He found other tricks too. He used a heat rub called Capsulin. This rub made him sweat heavily, which gave him a steady, natural source of moisture right there on his own body. He always seemed to have something slick within reach. Later in his career, Perry added one more famous trick. He called it the puffball. Throw it. He would load his hand with rosin dust. When he let the pitch go, a thick cloud of white powder burst into the air. That cloud made it harder for the hitter to even see the ball coming. It was sneaky, it was clever, and it was deeply unfair. Baseball decided it had seen enough. The league officially banned the puffball in 1981. That rule was created for one main reason, and that reason was Gaylord Perry. The sport had to write a new rule just to keep up with his games. That is a stunning thing to sit with. Perry did not simply break a rule, forced baseball to invent new rules to try to stop him. He turned pitching into a mind game and made the whole sport chase after him. He was not a harmless prankster. He was a man who weaponized doubt. Now, after all of that, it would be easy to write Gaylord Perry off as nothing but a cheat. But that would be unfair and untrue, because the strangest part of his story is this. He really was great. The talent was real, and the proof is impossible to ignore. Start with this simple fact. The over 22 seasons, Perry was inspected hundreds of times. The umpires checked his hands, his cap, his uniform, and the ball over and over. Yet in all those years, he was ejected for doctoring the baseball only one single time. One time in more than 2 decades. That is either the work of a man who was mostly clean, or the work of a man who was simply too good to catch. Perry himself always said that most of his success came from legal pitches. He admitted he used his wild reputation to scare hitters, but he insisted the real work was done with skill. And here's the important thing. People who caught him agreed. His former catchers said his command, his sharp curveball, and his late sinking fastball were elite even without any tricks. The men closest to him, the men who actually caught his pitches, said the talent was real. The numbers backed them up. Perry finished his career with 90 wins above replacement. That total ranks 7th among all pitchers who debuted after baseball became integrated, which places him in very rare company. He pitched 5,350 innings in his life, the 6th highest total in the entire history of the game, 303 complete games. That means 303 times. He started a game and finished it himself, with no help. He was the last pitcher in Major League history to pass 300 complete games. No one since has done it. His durability was almost unbelievable. The over 22 seasons, Perry missed only 2 turns in his rotation. 2, in a job that destroys arms and ends careers early. He kept showing up again and again, year after year. He had 6 different seasons in which he pitched 300 innings or more. He was the last right-handed pitcher of the 20th century to pass 5,000 innings. The pitchers today rarely come close to those numbers. He had moments of pure brilliance. On September 17, 1968, Perry threw a no-hitter. He won that game 1-0, and the pitcher he beat that day was the great Bob Gibson, one of the best who ever lived. It takes a special arm to throw a no-hitter at all. Takes something more to do it in a duel against a legend. He also piled up the strikeouts. Perry finished with 3,534 strikeouts. The time he retired, that ranked 3rd in all of baseball history. It still ranks high among the all-time leaders. And there's more. He started 690 games in his career, which ranks 2nd all-time among right-handed pitchers. His career ERA was 3.11, a strong mark for keeping runs off the board across 2 long decades. Even his loss total tells a story. He lost 265 games, but that high number only happened because he pitched so much for so many years. You cannot lose that many games unless you're trusted to take the ball over and over again. These are not the numbers of a fraud. These are the numbers of one of the greatest pitchers of his era. So here's the hard part of the story. The greatness was real, but was every great pitch he threw was wrapped inside the doubt that he had created himself. He earned the respect, but he poisoned it. People could not simply admire him. They had to wonder. And that wondering never went away. The nowhere was that tension clearer than at the 2 highest peaks of his career. Because at his very best, Gaylord Perry was nearly unbeatable. The first peak came in Cleveland. Before the 1972 season, Perry was traded from the San Francisco Giants to the Cleveland Indians. The trade came as a shock to many fans who never expected the Giants to give him away. But the move seemed to light a fire in him. In 1972, Perry was a workhorse like few others. He pitched 342 2/3 innings in a single season. He won 24 games. He kept his ERA at a tiny 1.92. That season earned him the American League Cy Young Award. He had reached the top of his sport. The second peak came years later when most pitchers his age were long retired. In 1978, at 39 years old, Perry was traded to the San Diego Padres. By baseball standards, he was an old man, but he was not finished. That year he went 21-6. He kept his ERA at 2.73. He pitched 260 2/3 innings. Just after he turned 40, he won the National League Cy Young Award. Think about what that meant. Perry became the first pitcher ever to win the Cy Young Award in both leagues. One in the American League, one in the National League. He also became the oldest pitcher ever to win the award at that time. That age record was so impressive that it stood for 26 long years. It was not broken until Roger Clemens won his final Cy Young in 2004. These were huge achievements. They are the kind of thing that should make a man a clean and simple hero. But even here, the second story never left. Even as Perry collected awards, fans and players kept asking the same quiet question. How much of this is real and how much is the wet ball? He was too good to dismiss, but he was too suspicious to fully trust. That tension was the price of the choice he made back in 1964. After the second Cy Young, Perry kept pitching, but now he was a traveler. His late career became a long journey from team to team. In all, Perry pitched for 8 different organizations. His teams included the Texas Rangers, the New York Yankees, the Atlanta Braves, the Seattle Mariners, and the Kansas City Royals. He went where he was wanted, chasing more innings and more wins. One of those wins was historic. On May 6, 1982, while pitching for the Seattle Mariners, Perry won his 300th career game. And in a fitting twist, that win came against the Yankees, one of his former teams. The 300 Win Club is one of the most exclusive groups in all of baseball. Perry had joined it. He was now officially one of the all-time greats. But the story would not let him have a clean ending. That same season, the suspicion that had chased him for almost 20 years finally caught up. On August 23, 1982, Perry was ejected from a game for doctoring the baseball. After all those hundreds of inspections, after all those years of getting away with it, he was finally caught and thrown out. He was suspended for 10 days. There's a deep irony here. For nearly 2 decades, people were sure Perry was cheating, and yet they could never prove it. Then, near the very end of his long career in his 21st season, he got caught one time. Just once. And that one time became part of how the world would remember him forever. It was the proof people had wanted all along, arriving far too late to change the winds, but right on time to brand the legend. Perry pitched one more year. He retired after the 1983 season with the Kansas City Royals. He was 45 years old. He walked away with 314 career wins and a place among the most durable pitchers the game had ever seen. The farm boy had reached the mountaintop. The only question left was how baseball would choose to remember him. That question came to a head with the Hall of Fame. Perry's numbers were so strong that on paper, he was an easy choice. 314 wins, 3,534 strikeouts, 303 complete games. Those are the kind of totals that almost always earn a fast trip to Cooperstown. But Perry's case was not fast. It was delayed. Perry was finally elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1991. But it took him 3 years on the ballot to get there. He was not a first ballot choice. When he did get in, he received 77, 2% of the vote, just over the line he needed. Why the wait? The answer is the wet pitch. Some voters could not bring themselves to vote quickly for a man so closely tied to an illegal pitch. His reputation as a rule breaker held him back, even when his numbers screamed that he belonged. In the end, the numbers won. They were simply too big to deny. Notice what the Hall of Fame did and did not do. Gave Perry his plaque. It made him an official immortal of the game. What it did not do was settle the argument. If anything, the delay made the argument permanent. He got into Cooperstown, but he did not get a clean story. The debate followed him right onto the wall of the greatest players who ever lived. Here is where many fans think the story ends. The A-great pitcher, a famous cheat, a delayed plaque. But real answer to what happened to Gaylord Perry was only beginning. Because after baseball, life hit him harder than most people know. After he retired, Perry went home. He returned to his roots in North Carolina, the same world of soil and seasons he had grown up in. He bought a 500-acre farm in Martin County. On that land, he grew tobacco, peanuts, soybeans, and corn. It should have been a peaceful second chapter. The famous son of tenant farmers, now a landowner working his own ground. But the timing was terrible. Perry returned to farming right in the middle of the American agricultural crisis of the mid-1980s. This crisis was brutal for farmers across the country. Interest rates were sky high. Land values were collapsing. Demand for crops sold overseas fell sharply. Thousands of independent farmers were pushed into ruin. It was one of the worst times to be a farmer in modern American history. Perry got caught in that storm. His farm depended heavily on credit. He borrowed money for equipment. He borrowed money for planting each season. But when prices fell and land values dropped, that debt became impossible to carry. The farm could not pay for itself. The numbers stopped working. In 1986, the man who had won 314 games was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. When reporters asked him about it, Perry did not make excuses or give a long speech. He simply called it, in his dry way, a farm situation. 3 plain words to describe a painful collapse. Here is the cruel circle of his life. As a young man, Perry used his signing bonus to free his parents from farm debt. He was the hero who paid off the family's loans. Now, decades later, farm debt had come back to find him. The thing he had once saved his family from had finally caught him. He escaped the farm's debts as a boy and was caught by them as a man. During this hard time, Perry even looked at a new path. He thought about going into politics. He was a strong supporter of the Republican Party. He campaigned for the conservative Senator Jesse Helms. He even briefly thought about running for the United States House of Representatives in 1986. But in the end, he stepped away from those plans. His family's money troubles came first. To steady his income, he took a sales management job with a company called Fiesta Foods. The Hall of Fame pitcher was now working a regular job to keep his family afloat. His real comeback, though, would not come from politics or sales. It would come from baseball in a place he never expected. In late 1986, a small school called Limestone College, now Limestone University, reached out to him. The school was in Gaffney, South Carolina. They had a bold idea. They wanted Perry to build their very first college baseball program from nothing. Perry said yes. When he arrived, he found out just how much from nothing really meant. There was no baseball history at the school. There was no equipment. There was not even a playing field. He was not taking over a team. He was being asked to create one out of thin air. So Perry got to work. He used his famous name to raise money. He helped fund the building of the fields and facilities the team would need. He went out and recruited the very first group of players. Brick by brick, He built a program where none had existed. He coached the Limestone Saints from 1988 to 1991. Over those 4 seasons, his record was 81 wins and 57 losses. The young program even had 3 separate 20-win seasons. Years later, in 1998, Perry was inducted into the Limestone University Athletics Hall of Fame for what he built there. His gift to the school went beyond the baseball field, too. He served as honorary chair for the $4 million restoration of Winnie Davis Hall, lending his name to help the campus he had come to love. It was a real comeback. The bankrupt farmer had found purpose again. He was giving something back, building something that would outlast him. But this hopeful chapter is also where the deepest pain of his life arrived. Because while Perry was rebuilding, his family was being torn apart by tragedy. The first blow came in 1987, September 11 of that year. While Perry was busy recruiting his first class of Limestone players, his wife was killed. Her name was Blanche Manning Perry. She had been his high school sweetheart. She died in a car crash on U.S. Route 27 in Lake Wales, Florida. Another driver ignored a stop sign, and her vehicle was struck head-on. In an instant, she was gone. Perry was left to carry on without the woman he had loved since he was young. He had to raise their children and keep coaching at the same time. He had built a whole new baseball program, but he had lost his partner in life. No record on a baseball field can measure a loss like that. The facts are simple, and their weight is heavy. The family's heartbreak was not over. Years later, tragedy struck again, and this time it took one of Perry's children. His son, Jack Perry, had been a pitcher just like his father. Jack had played for his dad on that very first 1988 Limestone team. He was part of the dream his father built. And Jack could pitch? During the 1990 college season, he did something amazing. He threw 2 no-hitters within just 2 weeks, all under his father's coaching. The father coaching his son to back-to-back no-hitters is the kind of memory most families would treasure forever. But the joy did not last. Jack later developed leukemia. He fought the disease, but he could not beat it. He died on June 18, 2005. Imagine that pain. The father loses his wife to a car crash. Years later, he loses his son to illness. And that son had followed him into pitching, had stood on the same mound, had carried on the family's love for the game. In 2017, Jack Perry was honored with a posthumous induction into the Limestone University Athletics Hall of Fame, joining his father on that wall. It was a beautiful tribute, but it came after a loss no parent should ever face. So when people ask what happened to Gaylord Perry, this is a big part of the answer. The wins and the wet ball are only the famous part. Behind the headlines was a man who buried his wife and buried his son. The tricks made him infamous, but the grief made him human. In his later years, Perry found some quiet and some peace. Settled in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. He had a second wife, Deborah Lee White Perry, by his side. And though baseball had given him a complicated reputation, the game never let him go. And he never let go of the game. The San Francisco Giants, his first team, welcomed him back warmly. Perry returned to celebrate with them when they won the World Series in 2010 and 2012 and again in 2014. The fans cheered the old pitcher who had once worn their colors. Then in 2016, the Giants gave him a lasting honor. They unveiled a bronze statue of Gaylord Perry outside Oracle Park. Whatever the arguments about his methods, his old club chose to remember him in metal, standing tall, forever. There is something telling in that statue. For decades, opposing crowds had jeered Perry. The rival players had called him a cheat to his face. The umpires had checked him like a suspect over and over. And yet here was a team and a whole city choosing to cast him in bronze and stand him outside their ballpark for every fan to admire. The boos had faded. The arguments had cooled. What was left was respect and a strange kind of affection for the old trickster who had given them so many wins. It was proof that time can soften even the sharpest reputation. The man who had once driven an entire sport crazy had somehow become a beloved piece of its history. Not fully forgiven perhaps and not fully cleared, but remembered with warmth all the same. For a man whose name carried so much doubt that warmth was its own quiet victory, came the final chapter. In 2021, Perry contracted a severe case of COVID-19. He was an older man by then, and the virus hit him hard. He survived the worst of the sickness. He came through the acute illness. But the virus left lasting damage behind, harmed his breathing and his heart. His respiratory and cardiovascular health never fully recovered. The tough farm boy who had outlasted hitters for 22 years was finally facing an opponent he could not wear down. On December 1st, 2022, Gaylord Perry died. He passed away at his home in Gaffney, South Carolina, the same town where he had rebuilt his life through coaching. He died of natural causes at the age of 84. His body, worn by age, illness, and loss, had finally given out. His memorial service was held at the Camp Swafford Chapel on the campus of Limestone University, the school he had built from nothing. It was a fitting place to say goodbye in the one spot where his second life had taken root. So what really happened to Gaylord Perry? The answer is not simple, because the man was not simple. Some fans remember him as a cheat, a man who broke the rules for 2 decades and dared anyone to stop him, and they can never be pulled apart. But let us not end there, because for all the questions, the bottom line of his life is remarkable. Gaylord Perry was a poor farm kid with no indoor plumbing who clawed his way to the top of the sport. He survived poverty. He freed his parents from debt. He built a Hall of Fame career that lasted 22 seasons. He won 314 games and Cy Young awards in both leagues. When his life fell apart, he rebuilt it by creating a college baseball program out of nothing. He faced losses that would break most people, and he kept going. He was tough, gifted, loyal, and almost impossible to beat. He was not clean, and he was not simple, but he was unforgettable. Whether you choose to call him a cheat or a genius, you cannot call him small. He lived a huge life, full of triumph and pain, and he never once backed down. In a game full of legends, that is something no spitball could ever wash away.